It is,
So,
especially if you can know that being doesn't feel that strongly about it, and there's a part of you that does. That
there's a part of me
you have a sense of that dichotomy, or it
that,
seems like
right,
you have a sense of both sides.
and both sides are actually being. It's just that one side is judgmental, perhaps, or is maybe it's that being, as it's embodied in a person, is only a small fraction of the being which is out there. So for a person, having half of a bucket filled is when the bucket can only be filled to the top, having half a bucket is good. From the perspective of being as the ocean of being, adding half a bucket or three-quarters of a bucket or a full bucket or no bucket is
Hmm.
not going to make a difference.
Right.
Well, I also see that being in the human form, I think there's an agenda. And being in, say, non-human form, there isn't an agenda.
That's interesting. What's the
It's the
agenda?
agenda.
Ah,
Jinx.
what's that?
I said jinx.
Oh, jinx. You owe me a Coke?
Exactly.
You know when you say something at the same time, jinx, you owe me a Coke?
No,
You never heard that?
that's a South Dakota thing.
Did you know that from Colorado?
Not buy me a Coke, but jinx.
Oh,
When you said something at the same time, I knew that.
okay. We always
I
knew
like.
it as,
I think it's good.
yeah.
Steve, you owe me a Coke.
Okay.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
All right.
So how I see being in a physical body, having the agenda of the continuation of the physical body. So for me, that's what feels like is the fear with death, is that the continuation of being in the physical body.
The continuation of being in what?
In the physical body.
Physical body.
That's the agenda.
So if you don't do that, you're going to feel bad.
Well, maybe it depends on the level of awareness of compared to how much fear there is in the dying process. I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that um, someone's less aware. Would they be more fearful of death or less fearful? I don't know. It depends on the person. But my sense is that if the beingness in the body is connected to the beingness that's not the body, and having the awareness of that, it would seem to me there would be less of a fear of death.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I still believe, feel that there's an agenda to, the continuation of, life as long as possible for most people.
Right. Well, I think one of the things I'm reading some books right now about what happens to people in the last few days or hours of their lives, and what the dying process is like, and what the awareness in the dying process is like, the awareness of the person who's dying. And it seems like the universe has prepackaged a dying program in us, so that when the time comes, we all know how to die. We all know how to die, except you don't get that in maybe traumatic events like plane crashes or car accidents. But in general, we know how to die, and therefore, you know, Kim, your fear of what might happen in the dying process, you might believe would be allayed because of that, because something automatic will this in the knowledge which makes who you are. There's something automatic which will arise, which will help you to die in a good way, as opposed to, or at least give you the possibility of dying in a good way, even if you don't take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very reassuring, actually. And I'm sure you've heard the Ram Dass quote, or to paraphrase Ram Dass, he says, everybody dies, and so far it's been determined to be perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anybody we can ask.
Not that there's anybody to ask, but well, I mean, he can ask his guru, Neem Karoli Baba, who I'm sure would tell him the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The dying is a perfectly safe process. And so I tend to think that that's, in many cases, true. The question is, can you get out of your own way in the dying process, just like can you get out of your own way in the living process? And it's not always so easy.
Right. Well, it seems like the fear of death is obscuring in some way the living process because it's resisting what's naturally already happening.
Right.
Say more.
Well, I mean, you think about dying is happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, dying's all around us. Right? You know,
Mm.
when we eat dinner, we're basically, dissolving other life forms for our nutrients.
Mm.
So we're involved in the dying process. Our cells are dying and
Mm.
being replaced all the time.
Mm.
And I don't usually think of it as life is a dying process. That seems kind of morbid for me. But there's something about the fear of dying as somehow being an obscuration for living life fully. That somehow being concerned with something which is not really to be concerned about. If that's true, that death is a safe, natural process that we can't really fail at, then I guess I wonder what's the point of the fear about it, or what's below the surface of the fear of dying or of death.
I know what it is for me. It feels like there isn't control. That I don't really get a say in it. The I that's that feels like it has to be in control.
Right.
That's true. Yeah, I could go along with that. It feels like there's some fear of loss of control.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, your question is, what is there? How would you articulate your question?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, what's beneath
What's driving the fear?
This fear of death. Mm-hmm. What is it really a fear of?
Right. Okay.
Since we don't know anything, we generally don't know anything personally about death, and if Ram Dass is right, then yeah, we can't fail at dying. So there really isn't anything to be afraid of. So I'm just curious about what's beneath that fear of death. And there's a loss of control. There's a fear about that.
Go ahead.
And that there's a loss. Feels like there's a loss of the world.
Right.
All right. So loss of
the familiar.
Not familiar, but really loss of the things, and especially the people that I love. So it feels like there's a loss of that. And that doesn't feel like it's the loss of the love itself. It feels like the loss of the people.
Do you think they're going away somewhere? You never see them again?
Yeah. So it feels like, I would be going away. I would be leaving them.
Right.
And so I would really miss that.
Interestingly, most of the books about death say that you do encounter your loved ones again after death. And that's one of the greatest solaces that people have in the dying process, is that they'll meet up with their children or their parents or their loved ones in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think I do. I think it's possible anyway.
So how does that actually work? I've seen the Hollywoodized versions of there's the tunnel of light, and then you see the silhouettes of, children, parents, loved ones, standing there. So is that how you envision it? It would work, or,
That's not a documentary? They didn't tell me that part.
Did I just ruin it for you?
You did.
Ruin the ending? Darn it.
Um,